The millionaire needed a fake wife for 30 days. The poor girl said yes, then found out what he was running from. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. James Fitzgerald, a name synonymous with wealth and power, was known in all the right circles. He was the CEO of a tech empire, a man who could buy anything he wanted, and yet there was something missing in his life, a sense of freedom, and more importantly, a sense of peace. That was the reason he was standing in front of Emily Carter, an ordinary woman with a not-so-ordinary proposition. Emily was a waitress in a small town, struggling to make ends meet, working long hours to pay bills, and trying to keep her head above water. She wasn't rich, nor did she have any kind of prestigious background, but she had something that James needed, her willingness to help him, even if it was for 30 days. When James approached her with an offer that sounded too good to be true, Emily didn't hesitate. He needed a wife for a month, a fake one, and she would be paid handsomely for her time. Emily, at first skeptical, found herself drawn to the idea. The money could change her life, provide her with the financial security she had only dreamed of. She could help her family, pay off her debts, and maybe even pursue her own dreams. But there was something about James that intrigued her. Behind his polished exterior, she saw something deeper, something he was clearly hiding. Yet, for the sake of her future, she pushed those doubts aside. The arrangement was simple: 30 days as a married couple, playing the part in public, and then they would part ways. No strings attached, no questions asked, or so she thought. Little did she know, this contract would be far from simple, and her life would never be the same again. Emily was about to step into a world of wealth, secrets, and a man running away from something he wasn't ready to face. But as their time together unfolded, Emily would begin to unravel the truth behind James's need for a fake wife, and what he was really running from. Emily stepped into a world she had only seen on TV shows and in magazines. The moment she entered James Fitzgerald's mansion, she felt like an outsider. The grand foyer was enormous, with polished marble floors that reflected the sparkling chandelier hanging from the high ceiling. Everything about the house screamed wealth, but it didn't feel like home. James greeted her at the door, wearing a tailored suit that looked like it had been made just for him. He was tall, with a strong jawline and a confident posture, and yet there was something behind his eyes that seemed distant, like he was carrying the weight of the world. "Welcome, Emily. It's good to finally meet you in person," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of something unreadable. Emily gave him a polite smile, though inside she was nervous. She had no idea what she was walking into, but she needed the money, and this was her chance to get ahead. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. James led her through the house, showing her the various rooms, each more luxurious than the last. There was a home theater, a library with shelves upon shelves of books, and even a private gym. Emily tried not to let her awe show, but she couldn't help it. Everything was so perfect. James then showed her the guest room, where she would be staying for the next 30 days. The bed was king-sized, the sheets silk, and the view from the window looked out over an immaculate garden. It was hard to believe someone could live like this. "I trust you'll be comfortable here. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask," James said, his tone still businesslike, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Emily nodded, feeling out of place. "I'm sure I will be," she said, though she wasn't sure what she was supposed to do next. It felt strange, this whole arrangement. James's life was so different from hers, yet they were supposed to pretend to be husband and wife. "Dinner is at 7. I'll have the staff bring something up to your room if you prefer to rest," he said, turning to leave. Emily watched him go, her mind racing. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. The way he kept his distance, the way he never really made eye contact for too long. It was almost as if he was hiding something. But Emily didn't have time to dwell on it. She had a role to play, and she was going to do it well. The next few days passed in a blur of events. James took her to several high society gatherings, where they were introduced as the perfect couple. Emily was instructed to smile, to laugh, to act the part. She was a good actress, and at first it was easy. But as the days went by, the cracks in the facade began to show. James was polite but distant, never truly engaging with her. He was always on his phone, always looking over his shoulder as though someone was watching. Emily began to wonder if there was more to this arrangement than just the money. It didn't take long before she realized that James wasn't just running a business. He was running from something, and that something was closing in on him. One evening, as they attended a gala, Emily overheard a conversation that sent a chill down her spine. James was speaking to a man she didn't recognize, his tone sharp and urgent. "I don't care how you do it, just get it done. I can't keep this up forever," he said, his voice low but filled with stress. Emily's heart raced. She tried to shake it off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. What was James really running from? And why had he chosen her to play his wife? She couldn't ignore the feeling that there was much more to this story than she was being told. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She had been playing the role of James's wife for a week now, attending lavish events, wearing expensive gowns, and pretending to be the perfect couple. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, but beneath it all, Emily could sense a growing tension in James. He was always on edge, constantly checking his phone, his eyes darting around the room whenever they were in public. He was hiding something, and Emily was beginning to wonder just how deep the mystery went. The gala they had attended a few nights ago had only intensified her suspicions. James's conversation with the man had been brief, but the urgency in his voice was impossible to ignore. "I can't keep this up forever," he had said, his tone filled with anxiety. Emily had tried to brush it off, but the words echoed in her mind. What was he talking about? What was he trying to escape from? The next day, Emily was in the study, scrolling through her phone when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to see James standing in the doorway, looking unusually serious. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting this. She had been wondering when he would finally open up to her. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her tone casual, even though her mind was racing. James walked into the room and closed the door behind him. "I need you to promise me something," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "Whatever happens, you can't tell anyone about our arrangement. Not a single person. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, her curiosity piqued. "Of course. But what's going on, James? You've been acting strange lately. Is there something you're not telling me?" James hesitated for a moment, his gaze shifting away from hers. "It's complicated," he finally said, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't tell you everything when we made this deal. I brought you into this to keep up appearances, but there's more to it than that. I'm not just running a business. I'm running from something, and I need you to stay with me for a little while longer. I can't explain everything right now, but I will soon. I just need you to trust me." Emily's mind was spinning. She had known something wasn't right, but now it was clear that James had been hiding something far bigger than she had imagined. The man who appeared to have it all, the wealth, the power, the success, wasn't as untouchable as he seemed. He was running from something, and whatever it was coming for him. She felt a pang of sympathy for him, mixed with a deep sense of unease. "What are you running from?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the window, as though searching for the right words. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight. "I can't tell you yet, but soon you'll understand." Emily didn't know what to say. She wanted to know everything, to understand what was happening, but she also knew that pushing him too hard would only make him pull further away. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll trust you, but when the time comes, I want the truth. No more secrets." James gave her a small, strained smile. "I promise you, Emily, you'll get the truth. I just need a little more time." As the days passed, Emily found herself caught between curiosity and concern. James's strange behavior continued, and she couldn't help but wonder what kind of life he was really leading behind the polished facade. The more she learned, the more she realized that the man she was pretending to be married to wasn't the man he appeared to be. And whatever he was running from, it was only a matter of time before it caught up to him. And her. Emily sat in the grand living room, staring out at the night sky through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights below twinkled like a million stars, but she felt far removed from it all. It was as if the world outside was moving on, while her life had come to a halt, trapped in this strange, temporary world with James. She couldn't stop thinking about his words, the promises he had made. But every day, the mystery of why he was running grew stronger. She had trusted him, or at least, she had told herself she would. But the more time passed, the more she realized that her involvement in his life wasn't as simple as a contract. There was something far deeper, something more dangerous lurking beneath the surface. The days that followed only fueled her unease. James continued to be distant, his presence cold and often preoccupied. He had kept his word to some extent. He never once mentioned anything that hinted at danger, but there was always that undercurrent, something in his actions that felt off. He'd get calls late at night, speak in hushed tones, and whenever Emily tried to ask questions, he would deflect, offering little more than vague reassurances. "I'll explain everything when the time is right," he would say, his eyes clouded with something Emily couldn't quite place. Guilt, fear, or perhaps both. Yet, for some reason, every time he looked at her, there was something in his gaze that seemed to pull her deeper into his world. She knew it was dangerous. She knew she shouldn't be here, playing this role, living in this fantasy. But she couldn't walk away. Not yet. It wasn't just the money. Something about James called to her, and it wasn't just the mystery surrounding him. The more time they spent together, the more she found herself drawn to him. Not in the way she thought she would, not like a romance unfolding before her eyes. It was something far more complicated. She had begun to care for him, but it wasn't because of his wealth or his position. It was because of the vulnerability he hid so well beneath his facade. But she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in her chest that told her something was coming. She had overheard snippets of conversations, seen the fear in his eyes when certain topics came up, and she knew there was more at play here. It was no longer just about a business deal or a contract. It was about survival. James had been running for longer than she could imagine, and no amount of wealth or security could protect him forever. Emily was beginning to understand that whatever was chasing him, it was inevitable. It would catch up with them both. That night, as they sat down for dinner in the grand dining room, the air between them felt thick with unspoken words. James was quieter than usual, his eyes distant as he poked at his food. Emily watched him, wondering what was going through his mind. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low and measured. Emily's heart raced. She had known this moment would come, the moment he would tell her everything. She had been waiting for it, unsure of whether she was ready to hear it. But she knew she couldn't back down now. "I'm listening," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. James exhaled slowly, his fingers curling around his glass. "Of water. What I've been running from, it's not just the business. It's not something I can outrun by throwing money at it or hiding in this mansion. It's something far worse, something personal. And I don't want you to get caught in the crossfire. I don't know how much time I have, but if you're still willing to stay, you need to be ready for whatever comes next." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. Whatever it was coming, and it was much bigger than anything she had imagined. She looked at him, seeing the fear in his eyes for the first time. "I'm not going anywhere, James. I'm here, and I want to help. Whatever this is, we'll face it together," she said, her voice filled with determination. James's eyes softened for a moment, and for a fleeting second, Emily saw the man he truly was, a man who wasn't just running, but also searching for something he couldn't find on his own. But the truth was out there, and they both knew it. Time was running out, and when the truth finally came to light, it would change everything. The tension in the room was palpable as Emily sat across from James, the weight of his confession hanging heavy between them. The words he had just spoken were still reverberating in her mind. You need to be ready for whatever comes next, he had said, and she wasn't sure if she truly understood what he meant. But one thing was clear. He wasn't just running from a business deal or an angry investor. There was something much bigger at play, something personal, and Emily was now deeply entangled in it. She could no longer ignore the feeling that they were both in too deep to turn back. It had been a week since that conversation, and James had become even more distant, if that was even possible. He rarely spoke about the danger he was in, instead choosing to bury himself in his work and business meetings. Emily, on the other hand, had grown restless. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, that James's past was catching up with him, and with her. She had come to care for him more than she ever thought she would, but now she was beginning to question whether staying in this arrangement was truly worth it. The last few days had been filled with strange occurrences that only fueled her doubts. James's security team had become more noticeable, with men in suits stationed around the mansion at all hours of the day and night. The once peaceful, almost serene atmosphere of the house now felt like a pressure cooker, with danger lurking just below the surface. Emily couldn't escape the feeling that they were waiting for something, waiting for the storm to hit. One evening, as she was walking through the mansion's hallway, she overheard voices coming from the study. Curiosity getting the best of her, she stepped closer to the door, careful not to make a sound. "You need to get out of here," a low voice said. "We don't have much time." "They're getting closer." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the voice. It was one of James's closest associates, the man who had been handling most of his business deals. "I know," James's voice responded, tight with frustration. "But it's not that simple. If I leave now, I put everything at risk. Everything I've worked for, everything I've built. I can't just walk away from that." Emily pressed herself against the wall, her breath caught in her throat. She didn't want to eavesdrop, but she couldn't help herself. "You need to make a choice, James. You can't keep hiding forever. You're not just running from business rivals anymore. You're running from something much bigger." There was a pause, and when James spoke again, his voice was almost a whisper. "I know, but if I stay, I put Emily in danger. I can't let that happen. She's already too involved." Emily's pulse quickened. He was talking about her. She wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or terrified. It was clear that James's problems weren't just financial. They were personal, dangerous, and she was now part of the equation. As she stepped back from the door, her mind raced. What had she gotten herself into? The moment she had agreed to help him, she had crossed a line she hadn't fully understood. Now, it seemed like there was no turning back. The next morning, James was acting even more withdrawn than usual. He barely acknowledged her presence, his eyes focused on the screen of his phone as he typed away quickly. Emily felt a pang of sadness, but she tried to push it aside. She had promised herself she would stay. She had promised herself she would help him. But as the days passed, Emily couldn't shake the growing fear that they were on the edge of something catastrophic. The phone calls, the cryptic conversations, and the increasing presence of security made it clear. James was in deeper than he had let on, and the storm was almost upon them. What was James running from? And could she survive the fallout when everything finally came to light? Days passed, and the tension in the mansion grew unbearable. Emily could feel the weight of James's secrets pressing down on both of them, and every day she found herself more and more trapped in a life that wasn't her own. The once glamorous world of luxury, private jets, and exclusive parties had started to feel like a gilded cage. She had promised herself she would stay, that she would be there for him, but the longer she lived in this house, the more she realized she was getting in deeper than she could handle. Every time she tried to talk to James, he shut her out. He was distant, cold, always buried in work or on the phone with someone she didn't know. His eyes were filled with anxiety, and the walls he had built around himself seemed insurmountable. One evening, as Emily sat alone in the study, scrolling through her phone, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned around and saw James standing in the doorway, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said, his voice carrying an unusual weight. Emily's heart raced. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. She set her phone aside and motioned for him to sit. What's going on, James? You're not the same. Something's changed. He hesitated for a moment before walking in and sitting down across from her. The silence between them was thick, but Emily didn't break it. She needed him to open up. I've been lying to you, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily felt her chest tighten. She had suspected as much, but hearing him admit it felt like a punch in the gut. I'm not just running from business rivals or financial problems, he continued. I'm running from something much darker, something I've tried to keep buried for a long time, and now it's catching up with me. Emily's breath caught in her throat. What are you talking about? What's happening, James? It's not something I can explain easily, he said, running a hand through his hair. But it's big, bigger than anything you or I could have ever imagined. And it's dangerous. I've been trying to protect you, to keep you safe, but I'm running out of time. I don't know how much longer I can keep you out of it. Emily leaned forward, her curiosity and concern overriding her fear. James, you're not making sense. I'm already in this. You can't just shut me out now. What is it that you're running from? He stared at her for a long moment, as though he was trying to decide how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke, his voice trembling. I made some powerful enemies, Emily. People who will stop at nothing to get what they want. And they don't care who they hurt to get it. I've been on the run for years, and I thought I could hide forever. But now, everything's falling apart. They've found me, and they're coming for both of us. Emily felt her heart pound in her chest as the full weight of his words settled in. She had known that James's life was far from perfect, but she hadn't realized just how much danger he was in. This wasn't just a business deal gone wrong. This was something far more personal, something that threatened both their lives. What do we do? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James's eyes darkened, and he looked away for a moment, as if grappling with his own fears. We run, he said, his voice filled with determination. We leave everything behind, go somewhere they can't find us. It's the only chance we have. Emily swallowed hard. She had never thought her life would lead her here, but she realized she didn't have a choice. She had come this far. She had trusted James. And now, it seemed, the only way out was to run with him. I'm with you, she said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. Wherever we go, I'll be with you. James looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and regret. I never wanted this for you, Emily. You deserve so much more than this. But I don't know what else to do. Emily reached out and took his hand, squeezing it firmly. We'll figure out together, she said. We're in this now. There's no going back. The decision had been made. They were about to leave everything behind. But as Emily looked into James's eyes, she knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. It would be filled with uncertainty and danger. But for the first time since she had entered his world, she felt a sense of resolve. She wasn't just running away. She was running toward something, toward a future, toward hope, toward James. The days following their decision to leave everything behind were filled with tension and preparation. James and Emily moved quickly, their every move watched by the ever-present security detail that James had insisted on. They packed their belongings in secret, careful not to draw attention to their plans. Every conversation was brief, every action deliberate. Emily had never experienced such a whirlwind before. She had imagined escaping her ordinary life before, but never like this. The stakes were higher now, the danger more real. As they prepared to leave, James's demeanor had shifted. He was no longer the man she had met weeks ago, the confident, successful businessman who seemed to have everything under control. Now, he was consumed with fear, checking his phone every few minutes, scanning the surroundings as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. But in his eyes, there was also something else, a sense of urgency, a deep resolve. He had made his decision. He was willing to risk everything, even his own safety, for Emily. And that was the part that scared her the most. She didn't know if she could follow him into this unknown world, this life on the run. But there was no turning back now. The night before they were set to leave, James sat down with her in the dimly lit living room, his expression somber. I've been thinking a lot about this, he began, his voice low. And I need you to understand something. This isn't just about getting away from my past. It's about protecting you. I don't want to put you in danger, but I don't have a choice. I've already put you in too deep." Emily met his gaze, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "I've already made my choice, James," she said quietly. "I'm with you. Wherever we go, I'll be with you." For a moment, there was silence between them. James seemed to be searching her face, as if trying to gauge whether she truly understood the gravity of what they were about to do. Finally, he nodded, a trace of relief in his eyes. "I don't deserve you," he said softly, "but I can't do this alone." The next morning, they left the mansion in the early hours, slipping away before anyone could notice. The plan was simple: head to a remote location, lay low, and figure out their next move. But as the miles between them and the city grew, so did the feeling that they were walking into the unknown, with no map, no clear path forward. They drove through winding roads, past sleepy towns and darkened highways, until they reached a small, secluded cabin in the mountains. The cabin was old but sturdy, hidden away from prying eyes. It was the perfect place to disappear for a while, to breathe without the constant threat of danger hanging over their heads. As they settled in, Emily felt the weight of their decision settle over her. The life she had known was gone. There was no turning back. But as she looked at James, sitting by the fire, his face softened for the first time in days. She knew they had made the right choice. They were safe, at least for now. But the question still lingered in her mind. How long could they stay hidden? How long before the past found them? She didn't have the answers. All she knew was that they were in this together, and together they would face whatever came next. The first few days at the cabin were quiet, peaceful even, but the calmness only served to heighten the tension that lay beneath the surface. Emily and James spent their time in a delicate balance. He focused on securing their privacy, while she tried to adjust to this new life that felt as foreign as the mountains surrounding them. The beauty of the place was undeniable. Tall pines stretched high above, and the air was fresh and crisp, but the sense of isolation weighed heavily on her. It wasn't just the change in scenery. It was the constant reminder that they were on the run, that their time together was borrowed, and that there was no real safety. Emily had never been one to shy away from challenges, but this felt different. She wasn't just running away from a life she knew. She was running away from everything. She looked at James, who sat by the window each evening, staring out at the landscape as if waiting for something. His anxiety was palpable, but so was his resolve. He hadn't once talked about what he was running from, but Emily could see the toll it was taking on him. She wanted to help, but there was only so much she could do when she didn't have all the answers. "Are you all right?" Emily asked one evening as they sat by the fire. James's face softened as he turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "I'm not sure," he said honestly. "I don't know how long we can stay here. It's safe for now, but I can feel the walls closing in." His words sent a chill through her. They had escaped, yes, but it was clear that the past would eventually find them. The question wasn't if it would find them, but when. Emily sat in silence for a moment, watching the flames dance in the fire. She could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on her chest. But as she looked at James, she realized that despite everything, despite the fear and uncertainty, she couldn't imagine facing this without him. "We'll figure it out," she said, more to herself than to him. "We always do." James nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I wish I had your faith in me," he murmured. Emily reached out and placed a hand on his, the gesture simple but filled with unspoken support. "You don't have to do this alone. We're in this together, remember?" The silence between them was comfortable, but it was also heavy with everything that was left unsaid. As the days wore on, Emily's worry grew. She noticed James growing more restless with each passing day. He'd start pacing the cabin, checking the windows, and listening for any sounds outside. There were moments when he looked at her with a certain distance, as though he was already preparing for the inevitable, whatever that might be. Emily began to ask questions, but James deflected, always changing the subject or offering only half answers. She was starting to feel the strain of living in the dark, not knowing the full extent of the danger they were facing. It was one thing to run from something you didn't understand, It was another to live with the constant fear of the unknown. One evening, as they sat on the porch, the first true sign of trouble came. A car approached the cabin, its headlights cutting through the darkness. James tensed, his body going rigid as he stood up, scanning the road with a sharpness that sent a wave of panic through Emily. "Stay inside," he said, his voice low but urgent. Emily didn't question him. She ran inside, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched from the window. The car slowed as it neared the cabin, then stopped just in front of the driveway. James was already at the door, standing as if waiting for something or someone. Emily's mind raced. Who was this? Had someone finally found them? James walked outside to meet the car, his posture tense but controlled. Emily couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see the exchange in their body language. Whoever it was, they seemed to be speaking in hushed tones, their faces hard to read. After what felt like an eternity, the car turned around and drove away, disappearing into the night. James stood there for a few moments longer, his body still tense. Then he turned and came back into the cabin, closing the doors softly behind him. "What was that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. James didn't immediately answer. He walked over to the window and peered outside one more time, as if confirming the car was really gone. "Nothing to worry about," he said, but the lie was too thin, too hollow. Emily knew that something had changed. This was no longer just a situation of running. The past was closing in, and whatever had been chasing James was getting closer. She couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. The storm was coming, and there was nowhere to hide. The morning after the car left, the unease that had been simmering in the back of Emily's mind finally broke through. She couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter with the mysterious vehicle wasn't just an isolated incident. James had tried to brush it off as nothing, but she knew better. The way he had stood by the window for so long, the way his shoulders had tensed when the car first arrived, spoke volumes. It was more than just a routine check. He was being hunted, and the reality of their situation was beginning to hit home. As the sun began to rise, casting long shadows over the cabin, Emily found herself staring out at the same view James had been watching the night before. The mountains seemed peaceful, almost serene, but she knew that beneath that quiet surface, danger was closing in. The past was catching up to them. And now, it wasn't just James's past, it was hers too. They were both in this together, bound by a chain neither of them had fully understood when they first crossed paths. James appeared in the doorway, his face drawn, eyes weary. He had barely slept, his mind racing with everything that had happened in the past few days. "We need to leave," he said, his voice low, filled with urgency. Emily didn't hesitate. She had known this moment would come. She could feel it in her bones. "Where are we going?" she asked, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's not safe here anymore. We need to keep moving." James's words were sharp, final. But Emily could see the uncertainty behind his eyes, the fear he hadn't shared with her. They had been running, hiding for so long, but the time had come when there were no more safe places. They had to keep running, but they couldn't outrun their past forever. "James," Emily said, stepping forward. "I know you're scared. I can see it, but you're not alone in this. We're in this together. We'll figure it out." James met her gaze, the weight of his past pressing down on him. For a moment, he said nothing, just stood there, his hand resting on the doorframe. Then, slowly, he nodded, as if making a decision. "I know," he whispered, "but it's not just about us anymore. It's about keeping you safe. I don't know how much longer I can protect you." Emily's chest tightened. She could feel the truth of his words, the gravity of the situation. "You don't have to protect me, James. I'm with you no matter what." There was a flicker of something in his eyes, relief, perhaps, or something closer to acceptance. "I never wanted this for you," he said quietly. "But now, I don't know if we'll ever have a normal life again." Emily shook her head. "Maybe we never had one to begin with." The truth hung heavy in the air, but it was also freeing. They couldn't go back to the lives they had before, and running was no longer enough. They had to face whatever was coming. Together, as they packed their few belongings, the finality of their decision set in. The cabin, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. They couldn't stay there. There was nothing left to hold them there but fear, and they couldn't let that control them anymore. They would leave, keep moving, always one step ahead of whatever was chasing them. The world outside was waiting, and they didn't know what it would bring. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily felt like she was no longer running from the past. She was running toward the future, whatever it held, with James by her side. And no matter how uncertain that future was, she knew she wasn't facing it alone.